It begins with a date that should have meant nothing. July 2nd, 1955. A humid morning in New York City, the kind where heat settles on the runway long before the sun fully rises. At 9:55 a.m., Pan Am Flight 914, a sleek Douglas DC-4 bound for Miami, rolled toward the edge of LaGuardia Airport, its engines humming like an orchestra warming up. Families pressed against terminal windows. Travelers tucked newspapers into seatbacks. Pilots ran through final checklists. It was supposed to be an ordinary 2-hour flight, forgotten by history like thousands of others. But by 10:02 a.m., the moment the wheels lifted off the runway, Flight 914 began slipping into a story so bizarre that decades later, investigators, skeptics, and believers would still argue over what exactly was stolen that morning. Time, truth, or something far stranger. The flight climbed into a cloudless sky. Inside the cabin, the air felt light with the promise of vacations. Children kicking their legs, a businessman thumbing through his briefcase, a newlywed couple whispering dreams of Florida beaches. Everything unfolded with quiet normalcy until 10:14 a.m., when the last radio message was received. A simple acknowledgement from the captain, routine, unremarkable. Then, like a flame snuffed out between blinks, the plane vanished. Not crashed, not hijacked, not even a whisper on radar. One moment it was there, and the next it was erased cleanly from every instrument watching the sky. When Flight 914 failed to arrive in Miami by noon, air traffic controllers initiated a standard search. But as hours faded into evening, and evening into the thick darkness of night, the situation grew dire. Coast Guard crews combed the coastline. Military aircraft traced the flight path. Miami police cruised the beaches in case debris washed ashore. Nothing. No oil slick. No floating fragments. Not a single piece of metal. It was as if the aircraft had been lifted out of the world by invisible hands. By sunrise, headlines splashed across the country. PANAMFLIGHTNINEHUNDREDFOURTENIVERATLANTIC. Families filled waiting rooms with trembling hope, clutching snapshots of loved ones. Investigators pored over maps, weather reports, maintenance logs, every scrap of data. There were no storms, no distress calls, no reason a flight with perfect conditions should have simply ceased to exist. Days passed, then weeks, then months. Eventually, the search was called off. Life moved forward because it had to. Insurance claims were settled. Names were etched into memorials. Flight 914 was filed in the archives as one more tragedy swallowed by the ocean. Until 37 years later. August 9th, 1992, 5:13 a.m. Dawn breaking over Caracas, Venezuela. A quiet shift in the control tower. Nothing unusual except the soft buzz of fluorescent lights and the distant echo of jet engines preparing for takeoff. Controller Juan de la Corte sipped lukewarm coffee as he scanned the radar. Another routine morning, then a blip appeared, a slow-moving signal materializing on the edge of Venezuelan airspace. Old planes sometimes drifted off schedule, but this one had no transponder code, no filed flight plan, no identification whatsoever. He leaned forward, tapped the screen, adjusted the angle. The signal remained. An aircraft was definitely there. A crackling transmission cut through the tower speaker. A voice, scratchy, uncertain, almost trembling. Caracas, this is Pan American Flight 914 from New York to Miami. Requesting approach. Juan froze. He replayed the numbers in his mind, wondering if fatigue had twisted the words. Pan American? The airline had collapsed a year earlier. And the flight number, 914, scraped against a distant memory of aviation school lectures, of unsolved cases whispered among pilots. His colleague glanced over. What did they say? Juan hesitated. I'm not sure. He clicked his transmitter. Pan Am 914. Repeat your last message. The response came again, clearer this time, but quivering with confusion. This is Pan American Flight 914, scheduled to arrive Miami at 9:55 a.m., July 2nd, 1955. Silence in the tower. A silence so absolute it felt like the entire airport held its breath. Juan stared at the radar, then at the sky outside, as if the plane might simply appear in the open air. His mind raced. Prank, malfunction, hallucination, or something else entirely. He ordered binoculars brought to the window and swept the horizon, and there it was. A 4-engine Douglas DC-4 descending with slow, careful grace. The plane looked impossibly old, its silver fuselage worn, its design iconic of the 1950s but long extinct in commercial fleets. Yet it flew smoothly, confidently, as if it had just left LaGuardia hours earlier. Juan's pulse hammered. He contacted airport security, emergency crews, senior officials. No one had an explanation. They could only watch as the aircraft glided toward the runway, like a ghost coming home. It touched down at 5:27 a.m., tires screeching, engines whirling down in a long metallic sigh. Crews approached cautiously, unsure whether they were dealing with a historical anomaly, an elaborate hoax, or something supernatural. The cockpit window slid open. A man leaned out. The captain, with crisp Pan Am uniform, silver wings polished, hair swept neatly to the side. He looked irritated rather than frightened. "Why are we in Venezuela?" he shouted. "Where are the Miami Tower controllers?" Juan swallowed hard. "Captain, what is the date of your departure?" "July 2nd, the captain snapped. 1955. The ground crew exchanged bewildered glances. Behind the captain, passengers pressed against the oval windows, men, women, children, all dressed in mid-century clothing, all peering out with anxious faces that had no idea the world outside had leaped decades ahead. Before Juan could respond, the captain suddenly stiffened. His eyes darted to the modern airport vehicles, the strange uniforms, the unfamiliar architecture of the terminal. Recognition, horrified, impossible recognition, began to crack through his confusion. "What is this?" he whispered. The moment stretched tight, fragile as glass. Then the captain slammed the cockpit window shut. Seconds later, before ground crews could clear the area, the engines roared back to life with a violent surge. The aircraft lurched forward. Alarms echoed across the tarmac. "Stop!" Juan shouted into the radio. "Flight 914, stop immediately." But the wheels were already lifting. The DC-4 climbed sharply, veering away from the runway in a steep arc. Within moments, it disappeared into a low cloud bank, swallowed as abruptly as it had arrived. The radar blip blinked once, twice, then vanished. Never seen again. For investigators, the incident became an unspeakable nightmare. How do you file a report on a plane that died in 1955 and resurrected in 1992? The event was buried, classified under unverified anomaly, and dismissed publicly as a hoax. But scattered witnesses, the controllers, a few ground crew, early morning maintenance staff, carried the memory like a secret burn. They remembered the panic, the shouting, the impossible sight of that gleaming silver aircraft. Yet, as journalists later uncovered, the story did not end there. It branched, twisted, and spiraled into an urban legend that would refuse to die. Years passed. Detectives tracked down rumors of an abandoned aircraft matching the DC-4's description, seen drifting over the Caribbean. Others spoke of fishermen spotting a silent plane, lights dim, sliding just above the ocean surface before dissolving into clouds. Some even claimed to hear faint radio static. Pan Am 914, echoing across empty frequencies late at night. But at the heart of the legend lay a deeper question. What exactly happened to Flight 914? Skeptics argued it was nothing more than a fabricated tabloid tale, first published decades later. They pointed out inconsistencies, lack of official documentation, no verified radar logs, no surviving witnesses willing to speak on record. They suggested the myth grew from a mix of imagination, misinterpreted events, and the natural human fascination with vanished planes. Believers countered with their own evidence: old newspaper clippings, anonymous interviews, archived transmissions. They argued that governments often bury unexplained events, especially ones that threaten conventional understanding of time, space, and physics. They pointed to other mysteries: Flight 19, the Stardust incident, Malaysia; Flight 370, moments when modern technology failed to explain what the sky swallowed. Some theorists proposed wormholes, brief ruptures in space-time, capable of pulling an object into a temporal loop. Others imagined secret government experiments or time displacement caused by unknown atmospheric conditions. A few whispered about dimensional slip, an aircraft accidentally crossing into a parallel timeline, only to reappear decades later before slipping away forever. But among all theories, one haunting detail remained unexplained. Shortly after the alleged Caracas incident, a janitor reportedly found a small, yellowed calendar near the runway, the kind issued by airlines in the 1950s, with Pan Am's signature Blue Globe logo on the cover. Inside, the date stopped abruptly at July 1955. The final handwritten note on the inside flap read, Miami, 9:55 a.m. It was never proven authentic. It vanished days later. Stories like this don't survive because they are true. They survive because they refuse to stay buried, because they touch a place inside us that wonders whether time is as rigid as we pretend, whether the sky, so wide, so empty, so deceptively calm, hides cracks the human eye cannot see. In 2003, a retired air traffic controller from Caracas, living quietly in a coastal village, gave one final interview before his death. He never allowed his name to be published. He spoke hesitantly, voice frail, hands trembling as if the memories were too heavy. He said he was there the morning the plane appeared. He said he saw the passengers' faces through the windows, astonished, confused, terrified. He said the captain's voice sounded real, not staged or artificial. And then he added something he had never told anyone else. When the plane turned to take off again, he whispered, I saw something on the tail. Lights, flickering, like stars caught in metal. He paused. It looked wrong, as if the plane wasn't completely here. When asked what he meant, he shook his head and refused to elaborate. The interview never aired. The journalist who recorded it claimed the man seemed unstable, but the tape still circulates in obscure archives, grainy and low quality, filling late-night conspiracy forums with speculation. The modern aviation community dismisses the entire saga. They call it a myth wrapped in superstition, fueled by cheap tabloid inventions and human fascination with the supernatural. And yet, in quiet moments, some pilots admit that the sky still holds mysteries, radio echoes that shouldn't exist, radar ghosts that appear and vanish, routes where compasses twist inexplicably. One former Pan Am pilot once joked, if you fly long enough, you realize the sky remembers everything, even the things we forget. But the families of Flight 914 never found closure. Some clung to the hope that their loved ones lived decades longer, unaware of the time slip they were trapped in. Others believed the plane had simply crashed in 1955, and the later story was just cruel fantasy. A few, however, entertained a third possibility, that the aircraft still exists somewhere, caught between timelines, circling endlessly like a message lost in a bottle drifting across the ocean of reality. The legend never asks you to decide what you believe. It only asks you to picture it, to imagine a silver DC-4 gliding across a Florida sky that morning in 1955, sunlight glinting off its metal skin. And then imagine the same plane, unchanged, unaged, reappearing in 1992, its passengers still dreaming of Miami beaches while the world outside has transformed beyond anything they could recognize. Imagine the terror of stepping from a cabin, expecting palm trees and convertibles, only to find jetways, glass terminals, computerized neon signs, and machines that didn't exist when you boarded. Imagine looking at a calendar and realizing the world has aged 13,505 days without you. And imagine lifting off again, trying desperately to return to the moment you lost, only to disappear into the sky forever. Whether the story is real or not, it reveals something true. Our deepest fears aren't about crashing planes or missing flights. They're about time, how fragile it feels, how easily it slips through our fingers, how little control we have over its current. Flight 914 isn't just a ghost story. It's a reminder that even in an age of satellites and surveillance, the world can still surprise us, that the sky can still hold secrets, that sometimes the past isn't gone, It's just waiting in a cloud bank, drifting closer than we think. And somewhere out there, perhaps gliding silently above the clouds, is a silver aircraft with passengers who still believe it is July 2nd, 1955. A flight moving forward through time, one impossible minute at a time.